Welcome to Bedcrime Stories Podcast. I'm your host, T. If you like true crime without the drama and in a calm voice, you're in the right place. And let me just ask that after listening to or watching this video, if you find you enjoyed it or learned something, do me a favor, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment. And now, without further ado, let's dig in. Today in court, which was day 9 of testimony in the Richard Allen trial for the Delphi deaths of Libby German and Abby Williams, Major Pat Cicero of the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department took the stand. And he is a blood-stain spatter expert. Now, apparently, Cicero never had a chance to view the original crime scene. The crime occurred in 2017, and Cicero wasn't brought in until February 24th of 2024. So he had to rely on crime scene photographs, the autopsy reports, lab, and Department of Natural Resources reports. What Cicero had to say in the courtroom was fascinating. According to Cicero, Libby German was likely mortally injured before being dragged 20 feet or so to her final resting place. Cicero said he believes that Libby was pulled by her arm, and that's how she was found, with one arm outstretched above her head. We know that Libby sustained multiple wounds to her neck. Cicero believes that she was slashed near or against the tree, which would explain the red stains that were seen on the bark. Cicero said that Libby's hands covered in the red stuff reveals that she may have grabbed her throat to try and stop the liquid from flowing. There was also red stuff on her foot, which is apparently consistent with her walking through her own red stuff. Cicero believes Libby was standing upright at one point due to the flow of red stains on her torso. There was also red flow on her thighs, which reveals that at some point she was in a seated position while the red stuff was flowing from her neck. Cicero stated that the red stains and the patterns on the tree lead him to believe that the attack on Libby started at the tree, with swipes of whatever sharp object was used, causing stains and spatter on the tree. Cicero also hypothesized that a red-covered hand could have created the stains on the tree. Libby succumbed to her wounds in a large pool of the red stuff while leaning against the tree. Cicero believes that she was then dragged to the spot where she was found. Hearing about Libby leaning up against a tree makes it feel like once again she was sort of cornered and had nowhere to go. Cicero confirmed a detail that had come out before, which is that Abby had no red stuff on her hands or on the sleeves of the sweatshirt she was wearing. Cicero said it was very unusual for there not to be red stuff on Abby's hands, and that he'd, quote, never seen that before when there is no evidence of being tied up. He hypothesized that Abby was either restrained or unconscious when she received her wound. Could Bridge Guy have somehow knocked Abby out before he delivered the wound to her neck? And Cicero went on to say that although Abby's body was found partially dressed, wearing Libby's clothes, he stated that it was unlikely that Abby was dressed after being done in due to the lack of red stuff that would otherwise have been on parts of her body. So let's think about that for a second. If she was wearing Libby's clothes, and if it's unlikely that she was dressed in those clothes after being done in, then she may have been told to put those clothes on. Cicero did say that one person alone could have committed the crime, but he didn't rule out the possibility of multiple suspects. When the defense asked him if he'd ever seen bodies concealed at a crime scene, he said he had. And when asked what percentage of bodies were concealed with sticks, Cicero stated a very small amount. After his testimony ended, the prosecution moved to admit the search history from Richard Allen's tablet into evidence. The defense objected to the motion, and Judge Frangal said she would take the motion into consideration. What also came out in court today was that no DNA was found at the crime scene to tie the suspect, Richard Allen, or anyone else to the crime scene. However, there was a small amount of unknown male DNA found, but the amount was so small that it could not be tested. So the hope is that in the future, as technology improves, that DNA will be able to be tested and its owner identified. One of the people that testified today said that she did find male DNA in genital swabs and fingernails, but she said that is not entirely unusual because it could have come from shared clothing, and apparently this yielded very little DNA. Oh, and that hair that was found in Abby's hand that the defense made a big deal about early on in their opening statement, that turned out to be a hair from Libby's sister. Now, the unspent cartridge was also tested, but the DNA found on the cartridge was insufficient for further testing. Whoever did this either was wearing latex gloves or cleaned everything really well. So it sort of sounds like, again, that Libby was maybe forced up against the tree. That's where the slash wounds were delivered while she was standing upright. And at that moment, she might have grabbed her throat to stop the flow. Somehow her foot made it onto some of the red stuff on the ground. And then did she sort of slide down the tree and end up in a seated position, which would explain the red stuff on her thigh. And Cicero stated that Libby succumbed to her wounds in a large pool of the red stuff while she was leaning against the tree. And then after she passed away, the perpetrator dragged Libby to her final resting place. And perhaps Abby was told to put on Libby's clothes before she was knocked out, and only after she was on the ground was the wound delivered to her, which explains why there was no red stuff on her hands or on the sleeves of the sweatshirt. To me, this would imply that the perpetrator was on his hands and knees when he delivered that wound to Abby. And could the reason she only had one slash mark be that he had a better grip with her knocked out on the ground? If she was knocked out, she wouldn't have been moving. With her knocked out, not moving, it would have been easy for him to place that sharp object exactly where he needed it to be on her neck. Whereas if Libby were upright and moving, she might have been trying to avoid him and moving her head and, trying to flail. Maybe that's why it was sloppy and there were 4 to 5 different wounds. It would be great if Abby was unconscious when she was done in. For obvious reasons, you don't want her to see what's coming. And then poor Libby was left alone to deal with this perpetrator by herself. And that's a big maybe, because I don't believe anybody has testified so far as to the order in which the girls were harmed. I'm going to leave it there for today. This is video number 2 on this case, and I'll see you next time on Bed Crime Stories. Hey, smash that like button!